Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Spalding. Welcome to my presentation. I decided for my project I would focus on what I've referred to as advanced infant environments. This could be an incubator in, say, hospital setting, or it could just be a new look at devices such as cribs for household use. So this is my product. And I wanted to come up with a cool name for it, but I decided in the end, probably the best way to describe it is just a futuristic baby crib. That's kind of the best way to think about it. On the right, you can see sort of a little mock-up sketch of what such a device might look like. Sort of looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. I think hopefully that'll appeal to consumers. But more important than the looks are the features it has. So some of these features include, but are not limited to, temperature controller, so that the baby has a nice comfortable environment, a rocking mechanism, so that if the baby's crying or whatever, the mother could hopefully, or the father, could place this baby into the crib and have the crib do some rocking, maybe reduce the stress for the parent, they can get a little more sleep, something like that. Um, Importantly, huge feature of the product, advanced N99 carbon and HEPA filters for great air quality. We could also add a humidity controller and an air quality monitor. So not only do you have the filtration, but you know that the filtration is working because you have installed a quality monitor. Other features include smart monitoring. This includes like breathing and restlessness to make sure that your child is breathing properly or getting a good night's sleep. And I assume that these sorts of things would it'd be somewhat simple to have an app integration so you can monitor these things on your phone. Right now, we already have on our phones applications that work with some degree of success at monitoring our own sleeplessness and restlessness and breathing at night. So I thought it was a reasonable idea to extend that into children. And then lastly, that this device could be portable. It can be moved around. And you'll note that none of these features are really groundbreaking or, anything too crazy that we don't have. It's just that cribs for so long have kind of been this simple idea of just like a wooden box with, some blankets and pillows and a mattress, maybe some stuffed animals. And children are, very sensitive. They're not like robust adults that have been exposed to the world for a long time. And so I thought it seemed somewhat intuitive to start applying some of these new innovations to helping the infant have sort of a more optimal environment for its development, and of course to save the parents some headaches. And the filtration idea was actually inspired by the Tesla series cars, which also feature these products, which have been hugely popular in areas like California, where there's wildfires, and sometimes you might have ash in the air or the environment. And so people want to have some advanced air filtration in their car, especially besides wildfires if you're in areas with pollution. Which brings us to our next slide. So, what exactly is the motivation for this product? And I talked about that briefly on the last slide, but let's dive into a bit more depth. So I think a lot of us kind of know intuitively that air quality has been getting much worse since the Industrial Revolution or just general industrialization across the world. Um, and this is because, of course, machines are burning fossil fuels, and besides that, there just are much more machines and technology in the household. For example, your home water heater will produce carbon dioxide, things like that. And on top of that, infant lungs, as I mentioned, are extremely vulnerable. They're not robust like a grown adult lungs are, and so they're much more susceptible to hazards. Important to note, asthma rates are getting worse in the United States. So we're already seeing the health effects of these lower air qualities. Additionally, I mentioned that wildfires have been common in California. They're also common in other areas like Australia and New Zealand. And of course, these will produce harmful ash. And as global warming has progressed, they're becoming only more common. And of course, now We all know there's new airborne threats, things like COVID-19 or even just the flu. If a newborn baby gets the flu, that can have long-term health consequences or even be fatal. And again, there's just been very little innovation in the area of taking care of babies in the home or elsewhere, and so it seemed like an area ripe for innovation. Here we have a little graphic just to visualize the trends. So in China, the asthma rates across all age groups, especially in younger individuals, has been increasing steadily since the 90s. Over on the right, you'll see a graph from the CDC. This is looking at from the year 2001 to 2009. You'll see that total asthma rates for all age groups is up, but specifically in children. And while this data only looks at from 2001 to 2009, this trend has actually been going on since the 1980s and continues still to this day. So I think before getting into the question, let's remember Kling's definition of social informatics. So Kling defines it as the interdisciplinary study of the design, uses, and consequences of information technologies that takes into account their interaction with institutional and cultural contexts. So with this in mind, I thought that a key question was, could such a product have medical applications outside of just the typical consumer households? So, most people think a crib is just a home device, but when you have so many features installed in a product like this, it seems somewhat intuitive that maybe other areas of society might benefit from such a product. And I thought a great example might be the medical field. And luckily, the medical field being as important as it is, there's a large amount of data on this thing. So, on this subject, so the answer does seem to be yes. I think there is a good reason to believe that such a product would be in demand in a medical field. So in a 2018 paper, researchers focused on preterm births, which are births which occur before the typical 9-month period. That could be 8 months, could be 7 months. But when there's a complication that for some reason the baby needs to be delivered early, this typically leads to poor health outcomes for the child, and often they end up in the neonatal intensive care unit. This is the ICU for young children. And of course, that puts them at a much higher risk of health complications themselves. So the authors in this study focus on what it is that children in the ICU need and what affects their health outcomes, how such an incubator could be designed to help these health outcomes, and other considerations. So some of their key conclusions and things to note were that, first of all, the survival rate for preterm babies, even in the NICU today, is only 9%. So clearly this is an area which could use some technological improvements. And they found that the most important variables for survival were warmth, breastfeeding support, infection control, and breathing difficulty. Typically, the incubators that are used now in hospitals need heated fans to produce heat for the children. And often these produce noise, which then, the children are not supposed to be being subjected to that level of noise at such a young age, and so that disturbs their rest and their sleep. Also, in order to record their heart rates and make sure they're nice and healthy, they need to have electrodes attached to monitor that sort of information. Which, of course, on a baby, just intuitively, electrodes on a baby is not a simple task. And then lastly, because of the way that incubators are designed currently in hospitals, the lack of mobility has made it extremely difficult to transfer infants who need this intense care from one department of the hospital to another. So these were great conclusions that these authors found in the study, great areas for improvement, which I thought fit perfectly with our product, and gave some great clues on how to developed this product so that it could be popular not only with consumers, but hopefully be helpful to those in a hospital setting. So I conclude that yes, this product could be suitable for a medical environment rather than just consumer use, and that the most important considerations for that to be possible would be temperature control, oxygen levels. So perhaps in addition to the air quality monitor, add a oxygen meter, which might just be part of one anyway. Make sure that it is low noise so that the children can get a good rest and a good night's sleep, and the portability, which if you noticed in the picture before, it would be easily detachable, and I mentioned battery powered, so portability should not be an issue. And lastly, I talked a little bit about the heart rate monitoring technology. I thought that this was particularly interesting because there have been ways that have been proposed using things like AI and advanced acoustics to just listen to the heartbeat rather than having to attach electrodes. So I thought a great area for future research for this product would be looking into ways to better monitor the heart rate rather than using these electrodes. So this is everything for my presentation. I thank you guys for coming and listening, and I hope you all found it interesting.